Good morning, everybody.
Hi, this is Tom.
This is Amelia. So we're sorry we missed last week. Great story, the walk to Emmaus, but what can you say? We had a major, wonderful biblical storytelling event with the Biblical Storytelling Network of Canada. And I guess we just were too pooped
We
to
were
poop.
exhausted, right? Yeah.
We are beginning, I think, a series of stories, if you follow the lectionary, from the Gospel of John. And today's story comes from the 10th chapter of John. Anything you want to say before you start telling the story, Tom?
Well, this is a discourse that comes right after the man born blind. And so.
All right, here we go. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay. So this is the story. And Jesus is talking to the Pharisees. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. The wolf comes and snatches the sheep and scatters them. The hired hand, the reason why the hired hand runs away is that a hired hand doesn't care about the sheep. But I am the good shepherd. And I know my own, and my own know me. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this fold, and I must bring them in also, so that there will be, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. The reason why the Father loves me is that I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me. I lay it down of my own accord. I have the power to lay it down and the power to take it up. I have and have received this command from my Father.
Wow, thank you, Tom. If I remember correctly from ages ago when I was in college taking English, this sounds to me like Jesus is using an allegory. Would that be a kind of a correct?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not just a metaphor, but it's sort of an extended allegory with different characters who perhaps stand for different people. But the primary one is a shepherd. And that sounds like something that might really ring a bell in the ears of those who were first listening to him, the Judeans in the first century. Is that accurate? Would they have had, connections with the notion of a shepherd? Other than, of course, they had shepherds. That was a job, I guess. But in their scriptural heritage, their oral tradition from their holy words, would they have thought of something when they heard about shepherd?
Yeah, well, the first thing that immediately comes to mind is the Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. There are also a lot of connections with David as kind of the ultimate shepherd, as a shepherd boy who was taking care of the sheep who became king. But he always had that association with a shepherd. And that in turn was connected with the traditions of the Messiah. So the discussion that runs through all of this is Jesus' identity that John is proclaiming as the Messiah.
So do you think Jesus, I mean, was he intentionally making those connections, do you think? I guess we can't just get into his mind, but as best we can guess, do you think that was intentional, that he was making these connections to David and to the Lord, Psalm 23?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And that's carried out further in the story that he's telling, which has a lot of allusions and connections to the aftermath, to the siege in Jerusalem in 70, the siege of the temple, and then the aftermath of that. So the wolf snatching the sheep is, I think, clearly an allusion to the Romans.
Right, so well, let's back up. Who are the sheep?
Oh, the sheep are the people of Israel.
Okay. So the sheep are the people. The wolf, you think, is Rome?
Yeah. Yep. I think
what about the hired hand? We got the hired hand too.
Well, that's a good question, and it's a little more ambiguous, but I think it's an allusion to the chief priests who left Jerusalem at the time of the siege and left the people. And John has an ongoing, polemic, I guess, against the chief priests. And so this is part of that they ran away. They didn't care. And the primary connection that John's listeners would have made to that, I think, is the chief priests at the time of the siege and of the war.
Okay. So you said that this comes right after the story of the man born blind who Jesus healed, right. And then there was, that's a long story with lots of different stuff going on between the parents and the religious authorities. And how does this connect with that? Why does this story come next after that one?
Right. Well, in both instances, you have things that are kind of a two-level story. In the case of the man born blind, it is also a story that resonated with John's listeners in the early 90s with their experience of what was happening with the expulsion of those who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah from the synagogue. The parents, won't say much of anything because they're afraid of the Pharisees who are expelling people from the synagogue. This is a clear allusion to what was happening, then. So this is what John is doing, is making the story of Jesus connected with the story of the life of the people who are in his audiences, primarily Judeans, whose memory of the war and of the siege, the destruction of the temple and all that was fresh and alive. It was the greatest tragedy in the whole history of Israel. So there are allusions to these later things that are built into John's story, and this story of the Good Shepherd is full of that.
Well, I suppose, John was composed, something like 20 years after the war?
Yes.
So it might be some reflection on what had transpired after the war, who had cared for the people and who had run away, abandoned them. So yeah, that's interesting. You always think about how Jesus would have sounded. This is Jesus speaking, this whole thing. And who's he talking to anyway?
Well, he's talking to the Pharisees, who were the ones who were present and heard at the end of the story of the man born blind, when Jesus said, I have come that those who see may become blind, and those who are blind, that they may see. And the Pharisees said, well, are you saying that we're blind? And then this all follows after that.
Oh. Okay, so it might be, you might have said it with kind of a, I don't know, a harsh voice or a real authoritarian voice or a real kind of strong voice, but it didn't sound to me like that was your voice. How would you describe what you think is the character of Jesus's voice in this episode, and the reasons why you told it the way you told it?
Well, it's because Jesus is appealing to the Pharisees and to the audiences that he is addressing of people who would identify with Pharisees. They were the other major group of the Judean community that survived the war. And so this discussion with the Pharisees is going on, all through the gospel. And in this case, Jesus is addressing them, not in an adversarial way, as it is often told, nor in a kind of, authoritarian, big voice, I am the good shepherd. This is love language. I love the sheep. I care about the sheep. I lay down my life for the sheep. And so it is about Jesus' way, which is to love even to the point of laying down his life. And that's the main theme of this.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up, because what does that mean that he says, I lay down my life, I have the power to lay down my life, and I have the power to take it up again. Is that what he says? Is it power?
Right. Well, the word is exousia, which can be translated as authority or as power. And in this instance, the NRSV, chooses the word power, and that's okay. It's about Jesus' ability to determine his own future. Mm-hmm. So this is a reflection some 60 years after Jesus' death on the fact that he laid down his life for the people of the nation, and that rather than running away, he defended the people and laid down his life for the people of Israel. So part of what this tells against is there were people who say, well, he can't be the Messiah because he's weak. He doesn't have any control of it. The Romans took over, they took control and determined the future. He's saying, no. I do this of my own accord, and I have the power and the authority to do it, to lay down my life and to take it up again. That is to take it up in the resurrection. Yeah. So that in the resurrection that he was in a position of power at the right hand of God. So this is an appeal to the listeners to recognize how much Jesus had given for the nation, for the people. And then he's also here, the only place, identifying those of the who are of another fold, which probably would have been understood, again, in this allegory by the listeners to refer to the Gentiles. And that he would bring in the Gentiles, which was happening. The community that was being formed of Jesus' followers in the aftermath of the war was a community of both former Jews and former Gentiles, of Jews and Gentiles who were becoming part of one community.
And that's really where we get included. Those of us who are not descendants of Abraham,
biological descendants.
Yeah, that's where we get included in the fold. Because,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, well,
Right.
when you were talking about Jesus saying he had the power to lay down his life and the power to take it up again, it's almost as if he's separating sort of what happens out there and what the Romans were able to do to him, from his own sort of spiritual power, and which is the most important. So you can see why Gandhi was so inspired by him, because Gandhi saw the kind of power that is exercised by nonviolent resistance to evil, and and Martin Luther King Jr. as well. So that these were persons who had great power, despite the fact that they were up against worldly power, I guess you might say.
Right. And they
which
were
exercised
fundamentally weak. They didn't
Right.
have an army. They didn't have any, modes of exercise of power. And yet they were extraordinarily powerful. And that's the case with Jesus.
Right.
So it is, it is instructive for our time, for Justice and Peace Ministries now, is that this way that Jesus identifies is a way of power,
Mhm.
but it's power that comes from willingness to suffer for that which is right and good, of nonviolent resistance to evil.
Well, that's a good word for today. And so I think probably it's about time to sign off. Want to say goodbye to everybody, Tom?
Okay.
That's a hint.
That's my clue. It's an offer that I can't refuse.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
for sure.
you have the power.
Right. Well, I wish everyone a good week, and to think this week about Jesus as the Good Shepherd, who is, providing leadership and for you, and for
Amen.
all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.